Hello, and welcome once again to another episode of Inside the World of Max Headroom. Um, you know, this is one of those videos I am just absolutely nervous as shit about giving. And there's a good reason why. Uh, and let me get down to the point. First of all, this has to do with probably my last video on McCulty Manor and the McCulty Manor family. Um, and its contestants as well. And I'm really nervous about it because, you know, it's so obvious, and I've made two tapes about it already, that Russ McKamey's a evil dude and much akin to a cult leader, and has established actually a cult, and that's all in my prior videos. But and so that's an understood. I mean, before I go on, and also before I go on, I want to say that I'm in no way trying to hurt or embarrass or anything about any of the people that I want to address in this last uh, episode on McCulty Manor. And one reason I don't want to do another one is because I don't want to fuel Russ's fire. And I think the more media attention he gets, the more grandiose he gets, and the more the process grows, actually. So I'm a little leery about doing much more about it anyway. But I do want to try to address a side of the McKamey Manor narrative that hasn't really been discussed yet. And I think the reason it hasn't been discussed is because it has to do with a lot to do with the contestants, and also like what I call the McKamey Manor family, which are usually ex-contestants, which get dragged into being the so-called actors or supporters, or break off and start their own thing. I, that has not really been addressed much. What's really been addressed more is what a jerk Russ McKamey is, and how he single-handedly is, doing such audacious things. Now, I totally agree he is. So let's have that be understood. But there is that old expression: "It takes two to tango," and I want to just try to take the risk of presenting a side of this which is not often presented, primarily because I think in today's culture, we're very victim oriented. And it's not very politically correct to say anything negative about any kind of victim of any sort of, anybody who's been subjected to any sort of wrongdoing. And I in no way want to make victims out of the victims, you know what I mean, in the presentation. But I do feel some sort of obligation to explore, just journalistically, the other side of Russ's cult. And let me try to just do it briefly and see where we get with this. Um, you know, Russ has this pattern I've been observing, which is that he gets either ex-contestants who, for whatever psychological reason, look at the experience as positive at one point in time. A lot of those people end up changing their mind, and I think that's really because of things like the Me Too movement and Ron Swanson's valiant attempt to, expose this whole thing on surviving life. So a lot of the people who, have were originally like part of Russ's scene are now beginning to speak out and saying that wrongdoings were done against them. But I do want to try to address one thing which really speaks to Russ's predatory manner, because I think it involves a way in which Russ procures people to join his cult, and it's concerning to me. It really is. I've seen a number of videos where the contestants at one point in time will rave about what a great experience it is, and then later they join his his family, so to speak, whether they're these so-called quote unquote actors or whether those actors end up getting fed up with Russ and moving on and kind of doing a little more of the same with some modification of some kind, and then getting more contestants to say that theirs is better than Russ's. But I kind of want to address, oh, see, I'm nervous. The dynamics of the people who at whatever point in time become, you know, Russ McKamey cult followers, okay? Whether they come out later and realize that they were abused or not, there's something that Russ does that I think is very questionable, and that is that I believe that he selects victims either by the pre-interview or whatever goes on during those conversations that he sometimes, you know, makes posts, makes, you know, videos of or whatever. But I think that he's got a nose, like most predators, that where he's able to kind of sense out who's vulnerable and who's not, and who may have some kind of what we call in psychology, may get what's called in psychology a secondary gain from being tortured. Now that sounds kind of crazy because who wants to be tortured? But there's a lot of reasons that people might want to put themselves through some kind of high adrenaline, self-abusive kind of experience. And what I think Russ does is very early on, he senses out who can he get to join his, what's that, you know, his I forgot the expression, but, you know, his soldiers. And, you know, we've seen a lot of them. And I don't even want to mention their names because they've all been on TV, and I don't want to insult anybody personally. But I have to say that many of the people who come out and speak out very positively, at one point in time, about Russ's thing, and then usually end up joining his family. I mean, how many, you know, high priestesses has he had so far? I mean, I know there's Carol, and I know there's a whole bunch of other, Sharon, I think, I don't even know, Marissa, there's a whole bunch of them, and then they all, you know, kind of snap out of it for who knows what reasons, you know, but then they start to protest, you know, against him. But I want to point out that I think that Russ finds people who are good candidates to fall for the prank and then join his cult and help it grow more and more. And then, like I said, you know, generations start to break off of it because they realize what a jerk he is, because he's not that slick. He's not slick. He's not slick at all, as a matter of fact. And really, to me, he looks just like a meth freak, to be honest with you. You know, who can thinks he can climb tall buildings in a single bound, like Superman or something. But I think he's very good at sniffing out who might get some sort of secondary payoff out of being tortured, like he does. You know, I saw one video that really struck home. I'm not going to mention the person because she's kind of notorious. I mean, you know, she's been seen on a lot of different shows. But I saw her look like she was so dazed out. And yet, she mentioned two really interesting things. At one point, she said something like, her head was shaved. And she said, well, you know, I got my head shaved, you know. So, but that wasn't that bad because it was on my to-dos list anyway. Well, that's sort of telling, because that means that it really wasn't torture. It was something she was thinking about doing anyway, and he probably sorted out in the initial interview as well. And also, while she was like laying in bed talking, actually, I think about another haunted house, which was even better and more exciting. And she had a giant black and blue mark on her thigh. I mean, it was really a bad bruise. And, you know, she sort of, at least from my perspective, if you can put in the comment section below, as they say, if you disagree with me, but I thought she sort of wore it like a red badge of courage. You know, it was like, oh, well, look what happened. Look how strong I am. But, you know, it wasn't that bad. And then they show this big close-up of this giant black mark on her leg. And so what am I trying to say? You know, I guess I'm trying to say that Russ has a really sensitive nose for picking out the kind of people who may psychologically think they're going to benefit from sort of, you know, testing their mettle psychologically, or maybe distracting themselves from some internal problem that they have that has existed prior to going on the show, which kind of disqualifies the only PTSD bad result. In other words, I'm saying that there's a pre-morbid or a pre-existing condition where these people are kind of vulnerable to wanting to kind of enter into a form of self-abuse. I mean, let's face it, folks, you know, everybody knows the expression cutters, right? Or self-abusers. And, you know, the whole theory that that's based on is that the internal pain that you experience from probably a much earlier age haunts you, no pun intended, and is a way to get out of that that psychological jail of whatever experiences you've had prior to coming to the haunt and the adrenaline generated within the haunt and the aftermath of the bruises and, you know, showing that you actually dared to go, you know, to go where no man has gone before, I think serves oftentimes a distractive function, much like a self-abusive individual will say, well, it actually feels good when I cut myself or burn myself because I don't think about what's hurting me inside. I think he finds a lot of people like that. And he's very good at sniffing out people's, like, you know, again, pre-existing insecurities and problems and stuff like that. So he finds, you know, I mean, the word that keeps coming up for me is he finds wounded birds. And I hate to use that word because it sounds condescending, but I really don't mean it. I mean, people that have suffered somehow prior to coming, and maybe, you know, he can sniff out, as many predators can do, you know, he's able to get these people to actually not only go through the manor and show it off in a positive light, but also end up joining his family. Because if you notice, there's this shifting cast of characters, you know? Like, it seems like people can only put up with this guy for so long. You know, I just believe that this doesn't apply to everybody. Don't get me wrong. There may be some people who just really are into this shock thing and you know, like it. You know, more power to you, I guess. But the ones that I'm concerned about are the ones who just don't look really well put together in the first place. And I'm not saying that the manner doesn't make their condition worse, but in a paradoxical manner, it also may sort of, for the moment, fix a deeper problem inside. Who knows what it is? I mean, you know, sexual abuse. I mean, is somebody going to challenge me that there's a great percentage of people that have been sexually abused and don't talk about it? I mean, come on, we've learned, just watch the news. I mean, or YouTube. You can't, you know, avoid sexual victimization. I'm not saying everybody's been sexually victimized either. I'm just using that as an example because people who have been sexually abused are very, very well known for adopting these so-called aberrative adaptive behaviors, you know, such as bulimia. You know, bulimia is a very distractive process to be enslaved into, and it's very hard to concentrate on what's bugging you inside if you're constantly thinking about food and then feeling guilty about it and blah, 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 blah. You know, same thing would be said for people who self-mutilate. I mean, I could probably go on and on. But, you know, there is a whole theory, if you want to look it up, look up Alfred Adler, the purposiveness of emotions and behavior. And you'll see right there, one of the most famous psychiatrists in the world started out back in Freud's time talking about the fact that problems have payoffs. And solutions to problems, which aren't necessarily adaptive, also have a payoff. One of the things that he was very famous for saying that the people that were depressed, he felt one of the secondary payoffs was that they get a lot of attention, for instance, because they, you know, look like they're in such bad shape. I'm not going to go off onto an Adler rap, but this isn't just Matt's theory. I mean, this is something that's in Adlerian Psychology. Look it up. Harold Mozak's another guy, PhD, who's written a whole bunch about the purposiveness of behavior and feelings and experience, you know, maladaptive behaviors. So I'm not trying to attack anybody. I just want to make this picture more circular. You know, anybody who's ever watched my show knows that I'm a systems thinker. And so one of the biggest tenets of systems thinking is the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, which means, you know, yeah, one part could be very significant and another part could be very significant, but they're just parts, but that the whole is far more powerful. So in order to look at the McKamey Manor narrative, I think you also have to look at what some of the needs of the contestants are that agree to be tortured, you know, knowing basically what could possibly happen or not happen. You know, I told you, I think there's a lot of stage bullshit that goes on in the McKamey Manor also. But it's the cult that he forms of people that are wounded in some way, I believe. Not everybody. Please don't start telling me that I'm saying everybody who goes to, you know, McKamey Manor has been sexually abused. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that that many of them, especially the ones who end up joining his family for a period of time and becoming actors or going off on their own lives or whatever, or the ones that even, you know, snap out of it and say, oh my God, I've been victimized, but yet want to try the next one, you know, that the new guy started. That's the most curious thing to me. Why do people go through this 4 or 5 times when it's so awful? Because going through it and the adrenaline created by such distracts many individuals from some internal pain, which goes much further back. What it is, I'm not even going to, I've already speculated some, but there's probably all kinds of reasons why. I think I've said enough. Maybe I put my foot in my mouth too much. And I mean absolutely no disrespect to anybody who's been a contestant, anybody who's been traumatized by the experience. Because, you know, one of the really negative things that could happen with the McKamey Manor thing is, let's say you have experienced some kind of trauma. It could be war-related PTSD. I don't really care. Any sort of, you know, just really bad, or what if you're just incredibly chronically depressed? You know, well, going through the manor, at least for the time being in the short term, could snap you out of that depression for a little bit, make you feel really good about yourself that you did something that nobody else would dare do, and would distract you momentarily in a maladaptive way from some problem that may exist inside that maybe should be addressed through more formal means, like psychotherapy or medication or something of that nature, than by becoming a member of Russ McKamey's cult. Because remember, he's like, remember the Greek mythological character of Pan, the guy who would play the flute and hypnotize people and sexually abuse them? Or what's that other one? The Pied Piper, you know, who'd play his pipe and all the little kids would follow him. I think, you know, he knew just what notes to play just to get the kids to follow him to whatever they ended up jumping in a river or something. I don't know. But, you know, I do believe that Russ McKamey has a very sensitive nose. You know, everybody talks about his breath, but I think he's got a very, very sensitive nose in sniffing out the kinds of people that not only will go through the manor, but go through the manor in a way that makes the manor look like it's self-actualizing, like it's been a growth experience. But yet down deep he knows that it's really helping distract or whatever from some pre-existing problem that the person brings with them prior to the manor. Pardon my expression, wounded bird. I really don't like to use that word. And I don't say that applies to everybody, but I do think that the ones that are speaking out about it at some point in time in this very positive manner bring with them something that the process of the torturing actually helps sort of momentarily quell, probably through adrenaline and through some distorted sense of increased self-esteem for having even participated in this thing that so many people would be so scared to do. So, phew, I said it. We'll see if I put it on the air. I don't know. I'll have to watch this and see, because I took no notes. I did nothing. I've been participating in some commentary on some of these other channels over this, and I just wanted to just put it out there. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and Russ McKamey's manor wouldn't necessarily exist if he didn't have a very strong proclivity for being able to seek out people who need a distraction of a very intense nature, and therefore bypassing or detouring some other problem that they may have. And he may even find out about that problem through, because he's so convincing and such. Okay, well, I've said enough. I just wanted to get it out there, and I hope, again, nobody thinks anything like I'm being you know, like I'm victimizing the victim, because the people that go on the show, and that show, are all victimized in some way, whether it be by sleight of mind or by actually, you know, banging into something and hurting themselves. Everybody gets fucked around in that show. But just to fill out the other side of the circle, I thought it was important to point out some of what I think are some of the functions or purpose that serves the contestants, that are the ones that end up joining his family or speaking out in a very positive manner about it at some point in time until they sober up. Thank you very much. Nobody kill me in the comment section, please. I just wanted to throw out the other side. And thank you. And this has been another episode of Max Headroom. Good night.